Hi, I'm Rebecca Hamilton, and I'm with Key Ministry here in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm really happy to be with you at Inclusion Fusion. I'm glad you've joined us. I hope you're ready to learn a little about Respite Outreach and how it can work at your church to bring new people to Christ. It's a fun, really fun-filled outreach, and I love doing it here at my home church, so I'd love to share some ideas with you. So hang in there and make sure you look up the handouts, which will be listed on the Inclusion Fusion site, and that way you can follow along with me as I go. When we talk about Respite Outreach, we really can follow one of two main models. One is the event-based model, and one is more of the in-home, or what we call relational respite. And there'll be a whole separate module during Inclusion Fusion on the relational respite with Libby Peterson, which you'll want to make sure to see because it's really great. But when we talk about an event-based model, we talk about a fun party that happens either, once a quarter, once a year, every so often, where it's large attraction, it's a lot of fun, and you invite either children with special needs or adults with special needs, and invite them into your church home and just have a blast with them. Train your volunteers and have a good time. And it happens periodically, and it may or may not have a Christian focus. A lot of families who have kids with special needs sometimes have a negative connotation along with church. Sometimes they've been asked not to come back to a church, unfortunately, or they've had a bad experience there. So when they come to something like a respite event at church, we sometimes keep the focus on just general fun with some basic some basic activities that don't necessarily focus on a Christian message, and draw them into that relationship more slowly, just to give them a level of comfort. When we talk about what we call relational respite, it's really just an organic friendship, a relationship that develops between a family with a child with special needs and someone at the church. So it may start as someone who is a volunteer at a church outreach event and is paired with a child with special needs, and then out of that might naturally come a relationship that's just very natural. This happened for my own family with my daughter, who's 15 years old, and at the Respite Outreach events at our own church, which they're called Breathe Respite. She's been paired with the same young man for about 2 years now. And they've become great friends, and we've even gone to their home at Christmas time and babysat for him and his brother and sister while his parents go out. And we like to think of it as just being part of their family now and part of their natural support system. So it's less formalized than an outreach event, and it's just as needed. Why does respite matter? I try not to read to you because I know you're smart people and you can do that for yourself, but there's a testimonial that we received, and we receive these every so often. We just got this one, and I wanted to share it with you. It means a lot to us. This came from a parent of a child who attended a respite event. And it says, I wanted to send a sincere and heartfelt thank you for organizing such a wonderful program. One word could sum up our experience last night: amazing. Our children had an exciting time playing, crafting, singing, and dancing the night away, while my husband and I had a chance to quietly reconnect as a couple and talk over dinner and coffee. Opportunities like this for parents of special needs kiddos are so needed, but don't happen nearly enough because of the inability to find appropriate care, the burden of finances, or sheer exhaustion from running to and from specialized therapies in schools. Thank you for affording us the opportunity to let our kids have a blast in a safe and nurturing environment, and allowing my husband and I to enjoy time together as just husband and wife. We're so grateful, and we'll be back next month and for many months to come. We'll also be sharing our positive experience with other parents that would also benefit from such a special program. Keep up the great work. How great does that feel when you get an email like that after you've worked hard to put together a respite event? That's all the thanks you need, and you really realize that God loves it when we do this and when we reach out to other people in His name. Who do we serve when we have a respite event? Well, we have a lot of audiences. The parents, we know, certainly need the break that they get through an outreach event like a respite night. We know that, although the data is conflicting right now and we've seen different studies, we know that the divorce rate for parents of kids who have special needs is much higher than the average divorce rate, somewhere in the ballpark of 85%. And while we can dispute the exact percentage, we do know that it's higher than the average. And what we know is that they need a rest. They need a break from caring for their child and for all the therapies that comes along with that. And a respite night can do that. So the parent is one of our primary audiences for a respite event. The child with special needs is also our target audience because during their week, they have lots of therapies and lots of agendas that they have to do and goals to meet and objectives to complete. And what we love about a respite event is it's just fun. It's just simple fun. It's a party for the child to come to and get undivided attention from a one-on-one volunteer who's trained to meet their needs, and just to have a blast for a few hours together. There's nothing to learn. There's nothing to check off on a list or anything like that. It's just pure, unadulterated fun. We also love to serve siblings, the typically developing siblings of the child with special needs. They have a very specific lot in life as well because of being a sibling of a child with special needs, and a lot of times they have to go along to the different therapies and doctor's appointments and things like that, and sometimes they don't get the kind of attention one-on-one that they crave, and a respite event is a place where they can do that. We try to pair up volunteers one-on-one with siblings in addition to with the child with special needs, and that really allows the sibling to get one-on-one attention as well. And we serve the community because the watching world is looking at the church to see how we're treating those with special needs. And when we include them and seek them out in God's name, I think the watching world stands up and takes notice of that. And last and most importantly, we serve Jesus Christ because I know that he loves when he sees all of his children playing and just having a great time together at a respite event. We know why we do it now. We've talked a little bit about the importance of the why, but now we can delve into the how and really talk about the nitty-gritty. When we talk about where to begin, I think it's a great step to start with some brainstorming. Get together some of your greatest, most creative minds and have a brainstorming session about what would show God's most extravagant love to these families. We want to pursue them. We don't just want to let them come to our building and watch their kids for free, although we want to do that. We want to actually seek them out and have them come into our church buildings and care for their kids with excellent, excellent quality. And we want to brainstorm what would show God's most extravagant love to these families. Step 2 is really to think about inviting some guests. This will probably be the easiest part of the challenge of having a respite event, although it does take some time to get your audience grown to the point where you will have a nice critical mass of kids to attend your event. We've had some churches who we've worked with who have held their first respite event, and they've served 8 kids or 12 kids, and that's a great beginning. It takes a little while for the momentum to grow and for word of mouth to get out about the events and how well you're doing them, and then after that, it's really not a problem anymore. A way to get the word, to invite some guests is to get the word out in the community, and you can write a simple press release that you can give to local print media and radio stations and television stations. They love to know what's happening in the places of worship in their community, and it really is something of interest to them, and they will usually pick those up. A lot of the allied organizations, professional associations for things like ADHD, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, the county boards of developmental disabilities, and support groups, sometimes the MOPS, the Mothers of Preschoolers groups that meet in different churches, they like to know about a respite event. Also in offices of doctors, speech pathologists, physical therapists, counselors, those kinds of people have lots of patients who could really use a respite event, so they will help you get the word out as well. Word of mouth, it's referred to as viral marketing. This is the kind of virus that you'd like to catch and help spread. It's something that you want to be able to tell people about because it's so much needed, and it's a service that they really, families with kids with special needs really desperately need and need a break. So it's something that's fun to spread the word about. There are also things that we call outreach cards, which really are as simple as business cards that you can print yourself on your own home computer. And they just give information about the events, the dates that they're held, the location of the church, and then the website or phone number that they can call for more information. It's good to establish some guidelines for your events, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we like to stay flexible. So for instance, we usually do birth to age 18 years. But we like to design events that have a little flexibility built into them. So if we can at all accommodate the child or young adult, we like to be able to do it. The third step is to recruit lots of volunteers. As you can imagine, if we've talked about having guests paired up one-on-one with volunteers, and having guest siblings paired up with volunteers one-on-one, then doing the math, you realize that we could need a lot of volunteers. But this is something that volunteers really respond to. We find that typically it's a different group of volunteers than are the Sunday morning regular people who work in the children's ministry department. This has a different appeal. It usually appeals to a separate group of volunteers, and I think it's something that is fun-filled, has no agenda, as I mentioned, and it's just a lot of fun to be able to do it. I think it's important to be honest and upfront as you recruit and train your volunteers, and be honest with them about the people you serve. I think there's a connotation that children with special needs about things that might happen, people are afraid of mishaps or misbehaviors and things like that. I think we need to just get that out in the open as we begin to recruit our volunteers, have those discussions, and talk about people's fears, because once they're out in the open and you discuss them, and once you've held one event and they see how much fun it is, I think a lot of volunteers will see it's really not what they thought it might be. It's much more fun than that. Announcements in your congregation can also help to get the word out in the congregation about the respite events. Our own senior pastor, when we began this effort at my own home church, he said that he would make announcements from the stage on Sunday mornings, and I was a little skeptical that we would get the volunteer support that we needed. And he said, trust me, it'll be okay, it'll work. So he made the first announcement from the pulpit on a Sunday morning, and we got about 30 or so volunteers who signed up. And the next Sunday he did it again, and then by that time we had about 70 volunteers who had signed up. So I then had more faith, as I should have in the beginning, that we would have the volunteer support that we needed to pull something like this off. You can also partner with other churches. If you're a smaller church or a church building that isn't handicap accessible, you can partner with other churches in your area. You can even look at having, if your building is not accessible, you can even look at having it at a local school or a library or a community center, something like that, where they might have a more handicap accessible building. And partnering with other organizations, like the local high schools need service hours for some of their clubs, National Honor Society and things like that. So you can really partner with all of those types of organizations and people to get the kind of volunteer support that you need. The great thing about a respite event is there really is something for everyone. When you're recruiting volunteers, you don't have to love working with kids one-on-one. You can like to do food service, or you can like to do setup and cleanup, logistics kinds of things, administrative things. There's really something for everybody. So even if a volunteer or a prospective volunteer doesn't love working with kids and doesn't know anything about kids with special needs, that's okay. There's really a way for anyone who's interested to be able to help. Your church website and social networking sites are great ways to be able to spread the word so that you have all the volunteer support that you need. A simple plea on my Facebook page for we need more buddies for our Breathe Respite on Friday night, and usually that'll get a dozen or so teenagers right off the bat. So they're really powerful marketing tools for getting the kind of help that you'll need. And as I mentioned before, I like to be able to accept most any kid who has a need to come to a respite event or an outreach event. If he has medical needs that are pretty involved, then we try to make the answer yes, they absolutely can come, if we make sure that we then recruit volunteers that are skilled and well-trained who are able to accommodate that need. And a good way to recruit volunteers moving forward is to videotape or photograph your first event and then show it on the stage on a Sunday morning. And then people see it's just a party, it's just fun, it's not going to, nobody is, getting crazy, it's nothing that, you might have a misperception about. It's just a lot of good fun, and that'll get even more people interested in helping moving forward. So let's talk about the cost. I know that every church doesn't have a big budget. Some churches do, but most don't. And so if you're considering doing a respite event, your budget can be as big as David or as tiny as Goliath. There are ways that you can get sponsorships from local people or even businesses who want to donate either cash donations or give things like prizes or craft materials. I'd like to say there's a will, where there's a will, there's a way to do a respite event. They can be done on absolutely no budget whatsoever if you really canvass the community and have a core team of leaders who is interested in making sure that the event does happen, who can really network in the community and talk with people to donate things, and really it can be done in that way. There are volunteer roles, as I mentioned, that really fit almost everyone's personality or spiritual gifts. There are things like welcome and registration people who are at the front door. Those are your friendly people who can warmly welcome your guests and invite them into the church building. The registration team is your people who are administratively gifted, who can keep track of a spreadsheet and print out name tags and keep track of food allergies and things like that. Buddies are your people who just love to have fun with a kid, one-on-one. Just run around for a few hours and have a great time, play games with the kids or do crafts. There's a security team, which is really important. We like to make sure that security is posted in pairs of 2 throughout the church building at any exterior entrance or exit, just to make sure that kids aren't going to make their way outside the building. For a lot of the kids that we serve at a respite event, that's a really enticing thing, is an exit to the building. They might like to wander or run away, and we need to make sure that we keep them safely within the building. So we like to make sure that we have security people posted at every exterior door to the building. We also make sure that we have medical people at every respite event. So that could include an EMT, paramedic, it could be a doctor, a nurse, anyone in the medical field. And we like to make sure that there is at least one doctor or nurse who is on site at all times when we have a respite event. A lot of times we find that doctors and nurses and other medical professionals in the congregation love to have the chance to volunteer in their field for their church, because that's not something that typically they get asked to do. So a lot of times we find out a lot of people who are doctors and nurses who we didn't otherwise know. A lot of people like to do food service, so we set up and take down the snacks for all the kids. We'll talk a little bit more about the layout of a respite evening. Many churches do theirs in the evenings, say for instance on a Friday evening from 6 to 9, but other churches like to do a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. We've even had one church that we've worked with who has done them on Saturday mornings from say 10 to 1 or something like that. So food obviously will be based a lot on the day and time that the respite event is held, but you'll always need people who will help with setup and cleanup of food. Photographers and videographers are also something that can really help tell the story of the event and help to make those who weren't there the evening or the day of to really be aware and to see how wonderful it really was. And you'll also need floaters, and I can't really overestimate how important this group of volunteers is. In order for an event of this magnitude to be able to be pulled off safely, you always need to have people who are unassigned, who are simply waiting around the building for an assignment. It's very important to be able to grab those people at any given time and have them to help you with anything that might need to happen. Some of the responsibilities for some of the key volunteer teams would include the welcome and registration team will need to make sure that there's clear signage where people enter the building, where to come in, what to do first when they get inside the building, where to register or sign their child in, things like that. And making sure that those people are ones who can calmly and confidently greet guests and not be those who might be over the top with loud voices or strong smells or bright lights, those kinds of things, because those can sometimes be scary for kids with special needs. We want to make sure that we have parents sign the kids in and out, very important for security purposes, and many churches have the secure swipe cards that you can modify those to use for respite events as well. But a simple sign in on paper and sign out is fine as well. And recognize that we may need to have an entrance for an event where it's quieter or lower light or lower stimulation, where a kid might do better entering the building through that way. So just to know that some kids might better respond to that type of entrance, and that if a parent were to indicate, or if a child seemed to indicate through his or her behavior that that would work better for him, that was something you could utilize in the future. We even do, for the welcome and registration team at our own respite event, we have a little concierge table, and we like to print out a list of some of the movies that are playing locally and some of the local restaurants. And that helps because many of the people come from quite a distance to be able to have their children at the respite event, and they might not be familiar geographically with what's immediately around the church building. So this gives them an idea of where they can go within the 3-hour time limit of the event, and be able to get there and enjoy a meal or watch a movie and be able to get back in time to pick their children up. Make sure you give clear instructions in your welcome and registration team for where and when the kids need to be picked up, and also give a contact phone number, have a dedicated cell phone that you can use during the time of the event that parents can call and check in. That gives them a lot of peace of mind, especially the first few times, to know that there's someone or a number that they can call and just check to make sure that their kids are doing okay. And remember that not every parent is going to go on a romantic date on time away. They might go home, they might have a bubble bath, they might take a nap, they might clean up their house. So just to train volunteers accordingly to not say, oh, I hope you have a romantic dinner together, because a lot of times that's not the first priority for the overworked parents of kids with special needs. They might just need a little downtime. And then the information that you receive about the guest should then be passed along to his or her buddy who will be paired up with him, so that they have everything that the church knows about the child, they know as well. The buddies are sort of the cornerstone of this whole event. They're the ones who get to play and have fun with the kids and keep them safe. Just to remember that the buddy is really the equivalent of Christ to this family. As I mentioned, a lot of times there's a negative connotation that comes along with church for some of our families, and it's unfortunate but true. So when a buddy greets a guest warmly and says, I can't wait to spend time with your kiddo, or we had so much fun tonight, I can't wait for him to tell you what we did. We played in the bounce house, or we did a craft together, we watched a movie. Sometimes those are the only positive things that a parent might hear about their child with special needs. So we really like the buddies to remember that they really represent the capital C church to a lot of the families that visit the respite events. The guests and buddies need to make sure that they stay together at all times. We always train our buddies to make sure that they treat their guest as if it were a part of their body. So you wouldn't walk across the room and leave your arm or leg behind, and that's the same with your child that you are enjoying the respite event with. Make sure they're always within arm's length, and make sure that they stay safely close to you at all times to make sure that nothing unforeseen might happen. We also like to make sure that guests and buddies don't put, a lot of times the teenagers in our church are the buddies for our guests, and we want to make sure it's such second nature to a lot of our kids now to take a picture or to post names and places of what they're doing, and we just like to make sure that those who are going to be buddies for kids with special needs not put pictures of their kiddos up on Facebook, or not use their full name, to use first names only, and to maybe take a picture of the back of heads if they need to, because it's great publicity to be able to say, I'm having so much fun with Joey at the respite event at this church, but Joey's parents wouldn't very much want his picture or name probably on Facebook, so just to keep those things in mind. And we like also to remind the buddies to leave their texts and their phone calls for later, to just lavish undivided attention on the kids that they have been paired with for the evening. As I mentioned, the security team is another team of volunteers that's very important, and really their focus is very singular. It's just to make sure that kids stay within the building during the entirety of the evening, to make sure that no one gets outside. Even though it might be beautiful weather outside, it's safest if everyone can stay indoors. And a lot of times that security team is just a visual reminder to kids to stay inside. It's very seldom that they have to actually, step in and keep a kid inside the building. The medical team needs to also receive a copy of all of the registration information that any guest gives when they register to attend the respite event. It allows the medical team then to become familiar with any special conditions or allergies or anything like that. So there's always a way for the medical team to be up to speed about all of the conditions that are involved with different guests. The servers, as I mentioned, they're one of the things that you need to be most careful about in training the servers who will handle food, is just to be aware of food allergies. So you have to make sure there's close communication between your registration team and your food service team to make sure that all food allergies are known and are being carefully adhered to. A lot of kids who attend respite events, particularly kids with ADHD and autism, follow a gluten-free, casein-free diet, which most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. And so most of the respite events that are held at churches that we work with follow a gluten-free, casein-free diet, just to simplify and to make sure that every guest is okay with every kind of food. That's really a choice for each individual church to make up, but it makes it easier, I think, just to make sure that everything is safe for most all the kids to eat. And the photography team, something that they should be aware of is a system in place to make sure that when kids register for the first time, that they're given the chance for their parents to sign a do not photograph form, and then that there's some way to indicate on that child's name tag or registration materials that they don't want to be photographed or included in any kind of marketing, flyers, presentations, or anything like that. So just to make sure, what we do at our church is if a child has a do not photograph request on file, we'll put a small red sticker on the child's name tag, and then if photographs or video is being taken on the evening of the respite event, we just make sure that that child is maybe photoshopped out or not included in the shot at all. It's just an important way to really honor the dignity and the privacy. The floaters, as I mentioned before, are incredibly important. One of the most important things that floaters need to be available for are help with diapering and bathroom duties. A lot of kids need either help or assistance in the bathroom or need to be diapered across all ages. So what we like to do is what we call ministry in the light. We really recommend that no child and buddy be alone by themselves anywhere in the building at any time. We'd like for a floater to be with every buddy and guest, so that it just provides an extra layer of accountability and safety for the children, for the church, and for the volunteers and parents. And it's important that we tell the floaters to not feel underutilized and to feel like you're not needed at a particular event if you aren't pressed into service. That would be the best case scenario if you weren't needed, but really the very job description is that you have to be there just in case, because it's really so important that you are. General information to just keep in mind as you move forward with planning some respite events at your church, that you pray for the families that you're going to serve. Sometimes it's hard for them to just mobilize the troops to get out of the house and to get somewhere. So we love to pray for our families, just that they would get to us safely and that the parents would be able to step away for a few hours. And also that we not pray over them or with the kids out loud while they're with us at the church. It just is a sour taste in some families' mouths if their children have been prayed over or have been prayed with out loud. So we like to encourage churches to silently and fervently pray for the families that will come to your respite event, but just to do it with privacy until you understand the comfort level of the family. Just be aware that all of the volunteers in the church should know where a diapering station is and where to go with medical questions, where a first aid station or a first aid kit is located, and then also where to go with behavioral questions. We have a team of people that we call the behavior specialists, and we indicate them and have trained our volunteers to look for them by a different colored lanyard on the volunteer name tag. Those are people like special ed teachers or behavior therapists, counselors, things like that, who have experience with de-escalating behaviors in kids if it gets to that point. So we just encourage every volunteer to err on the side of call a behavior specialist if you're not sure, because a lot of times people really want to help, but they're just not sure how to undo a behavior once they see it beginning. So that's a way that we can have that team available so that everybody is completely safe. Your physical environment should really be set up so that there's a minimum amount of bright lights, strong smells, allergens that might be irritating to kids with special needs, just to make sure that there's no blaring music, loud voices, those types of things. So things that you might think of as being appealing to some groups of young kids might be really unappealing to groups of kids who have things like autism or anxiety or ADHD. So just to remember that touch might be unwelcome by some kids. It might be very uncomfortable for them to be touched. So just to ask first, would you like a hug? Could we give a high five or, a fist bump instead? Something like that. A sample respite evening, as I mentioned, a lot of the respite evenings that we work with churches around are on Friday evenings from 6 to 9. It just seems like a good time for a lot of churches facility-wise that their building is available. And we usually set up about 6 or so rooms that have different activities in them. One is a large motor space where we just have a larger space available for the kids. We have hula hoops and softball, bowling and things like that, where they can just really move their bodies and physically blow off steam if they need to. We also have a small motor space where there are things like puzzles and Legos and safe things that cannot be put in noses and ears, puzzles and things like that that really help kids with their small motor things. crafts, like something that's seasonal based on the month in which our respite event is being held. We always do a craft. There's always a movie, which we try to do just a G-rated Disney movie or something like that. And some kids choose to do all of the activities, and some of them choose to just do one activity for the entire time. And we really like to train our volunteers that anything goes. If your guest wants to sit and watch the movie for 3 hours, that's okay. If they want to just walk around the building for 3 hours, that's okay too. We have a music room where we do dancing and karaoke. We also have a bounce house, and there are other things. A lot of churches already own some kind of inflatable for maybe a summer picnic or something like that. So that's a great thing to use as well. And then we also like to have available for the kids at respite events either a quiet room or a sensory room or both. A quiet room is just a place where there's very low light, very little noise, very little really in the way of physical surroundings, just a place that's pretty stripped down. A lot of times a quiet space, a dimly lit space like that will just help kids to kind of hit their reset button when they need a little quiet or downtime. And then the sensory room is a place where we really have physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists. It's more of almost a therapeutic setting, and a place where they work with kids who are more seriously involved, who maybe use wheelchairs, need to have a little more therapeutic, like swinging and different kinds of deep pressure massage and things like that. So we have all of those set up throughout the evening, and kids and their buddies can just make their way around as many or as few as they like. Anytime we train churches, we like to talk about people first language and really focus on the dignity of the person and the person that God created, and to talk about the person first and the disability second. So instead of saying an autistic kid, to say a kid who has autism. And we just feel it's another layer of dignity that we would like to show to all of God's creatures that He created, and we feel it's really important. So unfortunately, we still hear terms like crippled and deformed and retarded, which are completely outdated and inappropriate, and we really want to continue to encourage people. We all slip up all the time and have to correct ourselves, but we want to continue to encourage people to think about the language that they use. One of the initiatives that Key Ministry is working on in partnership with the Vineyard Church in Cincinnati is called freerespite.com, and it's a movement across the entire country to mobilize Christian churches to be able to provide these free respite events for families of kids with special needs. We have built a website, freerespite.com, that goes along with it. And what it will eventually enable churches to do is to have a username and password, and to be able to log on, fill in their information about when their respite events will be held, what the hours are, how many kids they can accommodate, what's the registration deadline. And then it will allow parents in every geographic area to go onto this site and to search either by zip code or by some other things like denomination, and find respite events anywhere in the country that are high quality, free, and have trained volunteers with this minimum level of excellent care that we help churches to provide. So if you check the freerespite.com website, we're still working out the bugs at this point, but it will be up and running just very shortly. So we want to make sure that we continue to build our influence and our ability to serve by linking arms together with churches all across the country. We want you to stay in touch with us. The only way that Key Ministry is able to help churches is by knowing stories of churches who are already doing things, what's working for you and what's not working for you. So make sure you check out our website, keyministry.org, and stay in touch with us and use the resources that are on there. We also have 2 blogs that are related by 2 of our colleagues, Katie Weatherby and Steve Gersovich, and we encourage you to read those as well. And if you have questions or comments, please be in touch with us, either through the Key Ministry website or through inclusionfusion.org. I hope you've been able to get something, some great information today about how to start a respite event at your church. And if you have questions, please let us know. We love to help you in that regard. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, and God bless.